I found a love for me. Well, darling, just dive right in and follow my lead. Well, I found a girl, beautiful and sweet. Well, I never knew you were the someone waiting for me. 'Cause we were just kids when we fell in love, not knowing what it was. I will not give you up this time. But darling, just kiss me slow. Your heart is all I own, and in your eyes you're holding mine. Baby, I'm dancing in the dark with you between my arms, barefoot on the grass. We're listening to our favorite song. When you said you looked a mess, I whispered underneath my breath, but you heard it. Darling, you look perfect tonight.
The wedding day, a day to celebrate a new life together as a married couple. A day where two people promise to stay together in sickness and in health. Sadly, for various reasons, whether it is due to the death of a spouse or divorce, fewer than 5% of all marriages last 50 years. This is the story of one couple who have managed to join the 5% Club. This is a celebration of their 50th wedding anniversary.
I still kiss, but we're so in love, fighting against all odds. I know we'll be alright this time.
Chris and Larry both grew up on the east side of St. Paul, within a mile of each other, but they attended different schools and were 3 years apart, so they didn't get to know each other until around the year 1970. They were both born at Bethesda Hospital. They were raised in middle-class families by hard-working fathers who made it possible for their mothers to be home with the kids. Chris has one sister, Kay. Her dad, Tony, worked as an auto mechanic, and later her mother, Marceline, worked for the state of Minnesota. Chris went to Archbishop Murray Memorial High School for Girls, now called Hill Murray, and graduated in 1970. Larry has one brother, Joe, and a sister, Kathy. His dad, Joseph, was a carpenter and later became a building inspector for the city of St. Paul. Larry graduated from Johnson High School in 1967. When Larry was 16, he was going to buy a motorcycle. On the test drive, he was hit by a car and severely broke his leg. After 2 surgeries and about a year with casts and braces, he was able to walk normally. After graduation, Larry knew that he would be drafted to fight in Vietnam. He decided he would not go, so he traveled around the country until his mom was able to have his surgeon write to the draft board and he got a deferment. In 1969, he came home. He received a settlement from his motorcycle accident. With that money, he bought a 1969 green Ford Mach 1 Mustang, a 1970 red Ford Maverick for his mom, a TV, a stereo, and a 35mm camera. However, a week before he met Chris, he traded his Mustang in for an orange VW Bug. Chris and Larry both lived close to Lake Phelan. That was a hangout space for young people. Chris first noticed Larry driving his Mustang by the beach. After high school, Chris started working for the state of Minnesota Highway Patrol's Central Office. Larry started college at the U of M. Chris had moved in with two of her high school girlfriends. One Saturday, on a warm spring day, Chris and her roommate Mary decided to go down to Phelan Beach and enjoy the weather. This cute guy was there also, and he was snapping pictures of them. Months later, in November, Chris came home from work to find three guys watching TV in her apartment.
Our first time we actually met was at my apartment. I was living with my girlfriends from high school. Came home from work. There he was.
I knew one of her friends, her girlfriend's friend, I knew him. He brought me over. We were sitting up watching TV, and then she walked in.
From work, yeah.
She's wondering, what are you doing here?
But I recognized him. That's the guy that took our picture.
She probably thinks I was stalking her, but
Yeah.
I had a brand new camera, and I had a fancy car that I wasn't going to have very long. I wanted to get rid of it. So I was driving around the lake taking pictures, and saw these cute girls and took a picture of them, and
Couple pictures.
a couple of pictures. But then I never saw her again until I ended up in her house. That was a coincidence. The guy that took me just said, I was over there for a party, and I'm going to go back because I like this one gal, and it was her girlfriend. And he says, why don't you come with? I'm going, I don't know, because I didn't trust the parties he went to and the people he knew. But I said, okay, I'll go. So, turned out that that's
And
where she lived.
there was another guy there who hung out at our apartment all the time.
And I knew
and
him.
he's the one that let him in.
And I knew him too.
People are strange when you're a stranger. Faces look ugly when you're alone. Women seem wicked when you're unwanted. Streets are uneven when you're down. When you're strange, faces come out of the rain. When you're strange, no one remembers your name. When you're strange, when you're strange, when you're strange. People are strange when you're a stranger. Faces look ugly when you're alone. Women seem wicked when you're unwanted. Streets are uneven when you're down.
Well, with me, I grew up with people who had been associated with Jehovah's Witnesses, and they would talk to me, and then finally they took me to a meeting in 1967 over in St. Paul. But I wasn't quite ready, and it was some book, Babylon the Great Has Fallen. It was way over my head. And I had too many issues on my mind, the draft and the Vietnam War and all that stuff, and I wasn't ready for that. But then I ended up traveling around out in California and New York and Colorado and different places, and I ran into Jesus people and all kinds of religious people, and a longer story short, when I met her, Chris, in 1970, we were both kind of fed up with governments and what man was doing to the planet, and
Looking for some answers.
so we started looking.
And he always remembered what those guys had told him
Yeah.
about prophecies in the Bible. And so he wanted to know more.
Yeah. I went to the Kingdom Hall over in Minneapolis,
And
and
that's where he met Kurt.
Kurt and Sally.
And so Kurt started coming over and visiting us. And
Yeah.
when it really, the light bulb came on with the Bible was learning basic things like, what does the Lord's Prayer mean? When you grow up saying that prayer over and over, it's just a string of words. It doesn't really have meaning. But when it says, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, what does that mean? It means make God's name holy. what is God's name? The Bible says 7,000 times Jehovah. Never knew that. So that was like big time light bulb. And then you're praying, let your kingdom come and your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. You're praying for something to happen and learning what the kingdom was. The kingdom is a government with Jesus as the king, ruling from heavens and making the earth a paradise. So.
And we got a little blue book, The Truth That Leads to Eternal Life, and we read through that quick, and then we studied in it too with the Smiths, Kurt and Sally Smith. And that brought us basically, I think, to the realization that Jehovah's Witnesses had what was right.
Their Bible study with Kurt and Sally Smith turned into a lifelong friendship. After learning what the Bible teaches about marriage, they started talking about getting married themselves. Would they wait so they could plan a big wedding? No. A small ceremony was performed at the home of Don and Inez Nicholas on January 27th, 1973.
Yeah, Kurt said, is there one of the elders that you would like to give your wedding talk? And the only one I really knew or that stood out to me was Don Nicholas because of his Australian accent. Because when he'd give parts at the hall, I thought he was pretty cool.
So she invited her family, and I invited mine. And
yeah, so Don said he'd open up his house and let us have our wedding there. And so
one of Chris's friends, Annette, was our
my maid of honor.
Maid of honor, yeah.
And Larry's brother was his best man.
Yep.
Chris and Larry were baptized as Jehovah's Witnesses on March 25, 1973, just 2 months after getting married. They started attending the Riverside congregation located in South Minneapolis. They had a small apartment in Dinkytown by the U of M. But how would Larry support his family? Would he try to find a full-time job?
Well, I knew how to make money, and I didn't want to get distracted with that, because I knew it would take up a lot of my time. And I wanted to do something for Jehovah that would make him happy, and I knew a lot of people out there are tossed around by all the different ideas and by the churches and what they teach, and I wanted to get the truth out to them. And so I started in the full-time ministry. Well, the end of this month, in December 2022, I'll finish 49 years. And I start my 50th year, January 1st, 2023. And it's what I want to do. And Kurt and Sally were in the full-time ministry too, so they were good examples for us.
In 1977, Chris and Larry found out that they were expecting an addition to the family. Kelly was born in February of 1978.
I knew I'd have to have my own business, basically. So I tried different things, but one of those guys that took me to the meeting back in '67, he had a kind of a halfway business of cleaning carpets. And back in 1975, he took me to a job of his over by Lake of the Isles, and it was a nice house, and I saw how quick he got done with the job and how much they paid him. I don't know, it was $50 an hour back in 1975. I said, this is for me.
Thus, in 1975, the Grime Fighters carpet cleaning was born. And thanks to Chris's father, Tony, his vans and machines were kept in good working order. But how would Larry drum up business for his new venture?
He thought it'd be good to deliver flyers to people in the neighborhood so that he could get business close by. But then he thought, why just deliver coupons for my business? Let's get people to pay us to do it.
A whole bunch of people, yeah.
So that's how Coupon News was born. So we started twice a year, and then we kind of whittled it down to the springtime issue. And 24 years, 10,000 houses.
Chris sold the ad spaces for Coupon News, designed the layouts, and ran the delivery. Larry also wrote 2 books about marketing for carpet cleaners and starting small businesses. They sold in the U.S., Australia, England, and Canada. Larry was successful at making money to support his family, but he was also very thrifty at managing their money.
Well, my mother was real smart as far as, she wasn't cheap, but she was real smart on getting the best deals. So I kind of was raised with that, and I would look for the best deals or wholesale deals or trying not to pay retail. And then we would go to thrift stores too and buy high-end clothes that people had bought one time for a wedding or something, and they dump it. We would buy them, and saved us thousands and thousands of dollars over the years, tens of thousands.
So that's one thing that we have in common that we do for fun is go to thrift stores.
But there was more to life than running their businesses. Larry loves to fish. That is what made him really happy.
He'd get together with some of his buddies and their families and say, let's rent a cabin somewhere. So we rented
We'd
one.
all share the price.
We did the one in Villard, and we did the one up in Alexandria, and
yeah, Vic and Darlene Payne,
yeah.
and the Guimauds, and the Perkins, and all kinds of different families. And that was a lot of fun.
the Millers went with us once. Yeah.
Yeah.
Chris and Larry participated in about 7 Kingdom Hall projects, including the remodel of the Riverside congregation in 1995 and 1996. Larry did carpentry, roofing, and food. Chris helped with brickwork, interior finishing, photography, and food.
So the hall projects are all the work is done by volunteers. Often these buildings would be completed basically in a weekend, and so anyone who has skills would come and join in and help get the project completed, and oftentimes even if you didn't have specific skills, you could do some of the grunt work. There's always work to do.
And they'd make a complete Kingdom Hall and be able to have a Sunday meeting.
Yep.
On
On
the weekend with the sod in and everything.
Yep.
The whole place, and the building inspectors were just going back and forth trying to figure out. It was so fast, but
So my mom and dad were born. It's the very western tip of the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. So it's about 250 miles from here. And my mom and dad moved down here for work. And so as a kid, several times a year we went up there to see my grandparents and my mom's sisters, and when I met Larry, I took him up there before we were married, and we stayed with my grandma and grandpa.
Yeah.
And I took him to some of the places where the families would go for their picnics, particularly Black River Harbor was one of my favorites, and that's just north of the towns where my mom and dad grew up. And there's hiking trails. There's the Black River as it goes into Lake Superior has a number of waterfalls, so you could hike into each waterfall.
I really loved going there.
So I took him and he just loved it. It reminded him, I think, of the woods where his mom and dad's cabin was, which they didn't have anymore. So
every year we'd go probably at least twice.
Yep.
We would even go skiing up there.
Yeah, I like to ski, and there's some really good ski hills up there. So we went up in the winter, we went up in the summer. Yeah, so we still go.
Fall colors are beautiful.
Yep, and of course my Auntie Kayla still lives up there, and she used to have that cabin, which there are a bunch of pictures of that. And so we would bring friends up there, and they'd stay in the cabin, and we'd stay with my Auntie Kay, and then we'd all go down and to hike the waterfalls.
In the 1970s, Kay's husband Floyd and son Mark built this log cabin. Mark planned to live there, but later moved to Milwaukee. But they kept the cabin and rented it out to snowmobilers, skiers, and others. From the first time that Chris took Larry up to meet the family, Larry loved the area. They started inviting friends to come up too and stay at the cabin. They all enjoyed hiking past the waterfalls and crossing the bridge to get to the beach. Some found it scary. Every time Chris and Larry would go up for a visit, the area could change, sometimes foggy, and one year storms had brought up tons of driftwood. Chris would love to bring all of it home, and the rocks. They also had some fun with Auntie Kay's bearskin rug one year. In 1987, Larry went to Bethel headquarters in New York as a temporary worker. He was assigned to do demo on the Pearl Street building. He roomed with 6 guys from different parts of the country.
Well, they were calling people who had any skills or no skills or to come out and help out. It was 1986, 87. I signed up to work for 2 weeks. And my job, I was helping take out an old elevator and put in a new one in a building by the Brooklyn Bridge. And I did that for a week, and then they put me on a carpenter's crew, where you went to different buildings wherever they needed you for a day, and went to another one another day, and it was a lot of fun.
This is the breakfast table. If you look closely, you can see the bottle of sriracha sauce that Larry brought. They had never had it before, and they loved it. You can still find it in the commissaries. This is the view of Bethel from the top of the World Trade Centers. He was also invited to meet Fred Franz, who was president of the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society at the time.
And he said, well, why don't you and your buddies come up and visit me on Friday afternoon? You have a kind of the afternoon off. So we did. We went up and visited him, and to make a long story short, we got into this big room, his office, and the whole governing body were there. They had maps all over the place. They were having a big meeting, and he said, come on in, boys. And so I said, okay. And I went up there, and he put his arm around me, or I put my arm around him. I forgot what it was, and I said to the other guy, snap a picture, they won't believe this.
There was a deal, airfare, $49 to LA.
Yeah.
And so we went with Janice and Steve Thielman, and stayed with Tony and Sharon Henches, who used to live in St. Paul, and went to Disneyland.
Yeah.
Spent the day there.
And I got sick on that stupid, what was it?
The teacups.
You know, you guys were
Teacups.
you were making it go real fast, and
No.
I got a little
He got
nauseated.
and he was nauseated the whole day. So, the rest of the day.
It wasn't that bad, but
Anyway, we did that, and then we drove up the coast, up to Monterey. That's where Steve had lived.
and I gave a talk there at the congregation.
And
that was nice.
yeah, we drove Highway 1 all the way. It was
They went,
kind of scary, and
You
we
went-
stopped at Hearst Castle.
and you went whale watching,
Yep.
and I went golfing.
He went golfing. I went whale watching with Steve and Janice and Kelly, and off of the coast of Monterey there, Monterey Bay.
And my ball hit Doris Day's house. And the guy I was with says, don't worry about it. They got $1 million umbrella policy if we hit any of the movie stars' houses, break anything, it's not a big deal. But I didn't break anything, but it bounced off her house. My slice.
Yeah, there we go with another crazy story.
They also met up with Stu Haw and got to enjoy Stu's tours of Pebble Beach and the surrounding area, including the Monterey Bay Aquarium.
And then we did a day trip to San Francisco, and went to Alcatraz, and hiked a little bit in Muir Woods, which is amazing.
And they put me in one of the cells and
Yeah.
took a picture of me.
In 1991, Chris and Larry purchased their home on 33rd Avenue in South Minneapolis.
It's a lot of it can be attributed to inheritance from both of our parents.
Yeah, her parents and my parents.
Yeah. Larry's parents first helped us to get this house.
Yeah. So
And then my
just-
parents paid it off, basically, for
Yeah.
us.
So we didn't have debt. We only had a small mortgage for just a few years, and then we just paid the whole thing off.
And that helped you to stay in the full-time ministry.
Yeah.
Yep.
Sure did.
So,
Yeah.
so that was important.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
It was. We haven't had a
Yeah, I
mortgage
mean,
in a long time.
when you get an inheritance, you think, oh, I'll splurge and travel or whatever, but he was like, nope, paying off these bills.
Yeah. I didn't want to be burdened with a lot of bills, and
Yep, so,
we've been debt-free for most of our 50 years. So it's not like we didn't have money for things. We just scrutinized how we were going to use that money. We weren't wasteful. And if we went on trips, we tried to find the best deal.
yes.
like that.
Larry has to have the best deal on absolutely everything.
Yeah, because why pay full price?
Yes.
We used to deliver cars to different states for companies and get a free trip with a brand new car, delivering it to a company and bringing back another car. We would travel like that sometimes, and for Valspar Paint Company, for example.
Yeah.
Chris also helped earning money for the family by working at Baker's Square as a server and helping with all the pie orders during the holidays. She worked there for some 20 years. Between 2008 and 2015, Chris and Larry visited Sally and Kurt Smith 3 times, who were living on the north end of Napa Valley. This is the view from the back of their home. They visited many vineyards, including Chateau Montelena, which was the subject of the movie Bottle Shock, Alora Vineyard, Del Dato Vineyard, and Mum Vineyard, to mention a few. The Smiths always took them to the coast. One year they rented a house on the coast for the weekend. In 2015, Dan Gospoder went to California with Chris and Larry. He used to live in San Francisco, so he took them to some of his favorite places.
So that was my Aunt Gail. That's my mother's youngest sister, and her husband worked for the State Department, and so they had assignments all over the world. My cousins grew up in many different countries. So my aunt was still working. My uncle was retired and my aunt was still working. And she said, if you guys want to come over and have a free place to stay in Europe, it's your last chance. I'm in Geneva. She said, and then we're coming back to the U.S. So we started looking for deals, and Larry found a $198 round trip to Paris in the year 2000. So it was before 9/11.
For 3 days, Chris and Larry went up the Eiffel Tower, did a walking tour of central Paris, toured Musée d'Orsay, which was Chris's favorite, and met up with Carrie Gray. This picture is significant. Notice the name of the street, which translates Entrepreneur Street. What is Larry doing? Looking for coupons. They also visited the Louvre with Valerie, Carrie, and Margaret. Then they took a train to Chris's Aunt Gail's in Geneva, Switzerland. She took them around Lake Geneva and to the Chateau Chillon that was built before the 13th century. They also visited a town at the base of Mont Blanc, the tallest mountain in the Alps in France. It was truly a trip of a lifetime. Larry and Chris have traveled to New York 3 times to tour the headquarters of Jehovah's Witnesses. Each time was amazing, but the most special was in 2011 when they were invited by Don and Nancy Commerce to the Gilead graduation. They got to know the couple through Larry's work on the Hospital Liaison Committee, which he has served on for the last 33 years. Don and Nancy came to Minnesota several times, and Chris and Larry got to know them well. They stayed in Brooklyn at the Bossert Hotel. They hung out at their apartment. The Gilead graduation was at Patterson. Larry was the guest speaker at their congregation on Long Island. It was a truly wonderful weekend that they will never forget. Because Larry is in the full-time ministry, he has been given many privileges, including being a regular speaker at conventions and assemblies of Jehovah's Witnesses.
Well, I don't know, because I was doing that, I ended up giving many talks on assemblies and district conventions and regional conventions that promoted that kind of work, full-time ministry, and then we got put in what's called the substitute circuit work, where we filled in wherever they wanted us to. When the regular circuit overseer was sick or had to go to a funeral or go visit relatives in another state, and so we would fill in for a week at a time, or sometimes 2-3 weeks at a time, depending on what the situation was. And we filled in congregations, most of the Twin Cities, a lot of the Twin Cities, southern Minnesota, northern Minnesota, Wisconsin, toward the western boundaries of Minnesota, and all kinds of little towns.
Yeah, that was such a privilege.
Yeah.
We had so much fun.
Henderson, Hutchinson,
Yep.
Northfield, Red Wing, Shakopee, Rochester, all kinds, even Austin, Minnesota.
Yep.
Should have went to the Spam Museum.
Yeah, we missed that.
We didn't go there though.
How many years were you doing that?
We did that around 21 years. So.
Both Chris and Larry were also involved in the live dramas at the summer conventions. They played a missionary couple in 1997. They played Luke and Bernice in the 2004 drama They Bore Thorough Witness to the Good News. Larry was often causing trouble during rehearsals. And in 2009, for the drama Prodigal Son, Larry served as the director. Larry's sister Kathy and her husband Bob own a cabin on Lake Vermilion in northern Minnesota. Chris and Larry have enjoyed spending many summers up north with their family, getting away from city life.
Well, my sister has 3 cabins there. One's on one side of the lake, and it's kind of a boathouse with a cabin or apartment on top of it. And then they had a pontoon boat to take everybody over to the other 2 buildings on the other side of the lake, because you couldn't get there except by boat. They have islands around there, little islands, and my cousin owns an island there, and
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. You just watch the eagles. And
we like to fish, but then we like to kayak, Chris and I.
Yeah, that was the first time we ever kayaked.
Yeah.
So we always make them dig out the kayaks when we come, and they do. So.
You had to learn to get in them without falling
yeah,
out.
That's the hard part, getting in and out.
Of kayaks.
In 1998, Chris and Larry celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary.
We had a party. We had a nice big party here, and then we went on a trip to California. Went to Universal Studios with the Henches. They were nice enough to go with us. We were just going to go by ourselves.
And I think
we were staying with them, and they bought us a cake and had some people over and had another party for us.
And I think we went to visit Chuck and Ellie Valors down in San Diego.
Yeah, we went down to San Diego and just explored the area, went to the zoo. And
it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, we had a good time. And Larry bought me a diamond ring for my 25th, and I had a really, really big cake because my wedding cake was very small.
While at Universal Studios, is that Larry and Tony as extras in the movie Dante's Peak? Larry loves cats. Chris does too, but Larry's the big cat lover. The first was Smokey in 1971. Then Smokey had kittens and they kept Rin Tin Tin. Rinny died in 1989. When they bought their house, it was time for a new kitty. So the people across the alley had some kittens and they got Sylvester. Onyx was a stray who made friends with Sylvester, and the family was complete. Sylvester had his own Facebook page. Everyone thought it was Larry writing, but really it was Chris. He died at age 20. But for Larry, almost any cat will do. You two have had many friends over the years.
Hundreds and hundreds of them, yeah. We have guest books that we
always force people to sign it when they come over, just because it's fun for us to look back and say, oh yeah, remember that time so-and-so was here, yeah.
Well, we've had gatherings of like 40 people here, and well, when we moved in, 75 people helped us move in.
We didn't have a guest book.
No, we didn't. I wish we would have had it with us.
But I have pictures of that.
Yeah.
How did you get so many friends?
Well, they're all people that we've met through
Over the
Jehovah's
years.
organization.
Yeah.
We've been in a couple of different congregations and visiting as when we subbed. Just meeting people and getting to know them, and you just click with people.
And friends in different countries that we,
Yeah.
even in Paris, we met people that became our friends. And so wherever you go in God's organization, you got something in common.
Yeah.
Chris and Larry also made many friends over the years due to Larry being on the hospital liaison committee. He visited many people in the hospital, and some even were able to stay at the renowned O'Connell Inn, which recently underwent some upgrades.
Some of those people are like our family, We just stay in touch, and we just have such good relationships and such good friendships.
We feel sorry for the spouse that's not in the hospital, that has to stay the whole time they're here. $100 a night in hotels. We'd just say, come on, stay at our house for free, and we'd have a ball having people here. It was a lot of fun. So.
I would say one thing I appreciate about Larry is if he thinks I'm good at something, he lets me go with it, and he
Yeah, if you're a better mechanic, put him onto the car.
I'm much more mechanical, probably because my dad was a mechanic, and I used to help him with the cars and stuff, and so he kind of lets me deal with that kind of stuff, and I enjoy it. And then he handles the finances, and he's way better at that than I am. And he, I do the house maintenance, he does the house finances.
Yeah, or the grunt work.
I put cheese
work.
on everything, he puts hot sauce on everything.
Yeah.
But I don't eat what he eats, he doesn't eat what I eat.
I think a good marriage, the guy just doesn't have to be a tyrant. It's, if the wife is smarter in certain areas, let her do it. Or Chris, I just tell her, decorate the house whatever way you want. As long as I got a warm house to live in, I'm not too worried. She keeps it up very nice, so as long as she doesn't throw my books out, then I'm okay.
I'm tempted though.
I have hundreds and hundreds of books.
Yeah.
Knowing what the Bible says about marriage and how to get along together has helped us over the years. It's helped us get over any rough spots, but
Well, I think that the thing that the Bible does is it emphasizes that marriage is a permanent situation, and you don't give up on it then. If you are committed to each other to make it work, you don't give up. You weather the storms, and then you end up loving the other person more.
And we don't have fights. You know, people get a kick out of us because they
We
think
bicker.
They think we're bickering,
And
which we probably
we are. Yes, we are.
You know,
bickering.
we're bickering back and forth, but we don't viciously have any fights.
No.
I can't even remember hardly anything ever, and not hardly any arguments. It's just this, you know, goofy bickering back and
Yeah,
forth
well-
about who's right on different things. And,
Yeah. I mean, we get along fairly well
Yeah.
most of the time, but we do bicker.
Yeah.
And everybody knows that. There's nothing new there.
It's all her fault. So, you know.
Of course it is.
We have many friends that have been married for decades and similar reasons why they stayed together. So again, we're not any special case. It's just that we've made it for 50 years and we're still bickering.
Yep. And I enjoyed going through all these photos and picking out the ones that, you know, were so special to me. And to me, this was just so much fun to kind of be able to share with people the fun things that we've enjoyed. And yeah, I really enjoyed doing this, and I hope the friends like, you know, hearing our stories. They always ask us, oh, we want to see your hippie pictures, and so we're always dragging them out and showing them on Zoom and all this stuff. So this way, you know, everybody can see them and hear the crazy story and enjoy them with us.
Looks like we made it. Look how far we've come, my baby. We might have took the long way. We knew we'd get there someday. They said, I bet they'll never make it, but just look at us holding on. We're still together, still going strong. You're still the one I run to, the one that I belong to. You're still the one I want for life. You're still the one that I love, the only one I dream of. You're still the one I kiss goodnight. Ain't nothing better. We beat the odds together. I'm glad we didn't listen. Look at what we would be missing. They said, I bet they'll never make it, but just look at us holding on. We're still together, still going strong.